Apparently, my interest in photography began soon after leaving the womb. At age 3, I'm on my father's lap, pretending to read the instruction manual for his new Polaroid camera. The next year, the local newspaper published letters to Santa Claus. In mine, I asked for a camera. I must have been a good boy because I received one that Christmas. It was a toy Fisher-Price camera that didn't take actual photos, but it was a start. If it weren't for photographs, I'd remember none of this. Two early influences have stuck with me. One is my father. As an Air Force officer during the Korean War, he took photos of his travels throughout Asia, and as a child, I often wanted to view a slideshow. His photos were documentary in style, but rarely about the war itself, instead of the people and places in his travels. The other major influence was growing up in the golden age of magazines. Each week, Time, Life, National Geographic, and Sports Illustrated arrived in the mail. My father, who became a dentist after the war, took the magazines to his patient's waiting room the next week. But the regular arrival of new magazines introduced me to the work of top documentary photographers and photojournalists. It was another 25 years before I became serious about photography, but those influences have shaped my work. Cartier-Bresson best sums up what motivates me as a photographer, capturing what can never be repeated, or as the critic Arthur Lubo describes, documenting life as it is seen, not staged. In sharing examples of my current work and practice, which is largely documentary or journalistic in nature, I'd like to do so in the context of more recent influences. This photo of a carnival game was exhibited at the Des Moines Arts Center. A member of the museum's board of trustees asked to buy my photo. When I asked him what attracted him to it, he said that it reminded him of his childhood and of Andreas Gursky. Much of my practice centers on education, and early in the COVID-19 pandemic, I caught this perspective of a custodian climbing into a school ceiling to install new air filters. Danny Wilcox Frazier's photo of a man fixing his pickup truck was clearly somewhere in my mind. I thought this shot from the hip photo was an interesting look at people along the famous boardwalk on Coney Island in New York City. Bruce Gilden had a similar take just a short distance away and 40 years earlier. I do not consider myself a landscape photographer, but I do enjoy stumbling across scenes that have some humor or irony, such as a goat standing atop a long abandoned truck left in a field. A similar touch of humor to what Stephen Soar saw on his travels around America. When I travel, I always try to visit art museums and enjoy capturing photos of other visitors interacting with the art. Apparently, I stood in the exact same spot as Thomas Struth at the Art Institute of Chicago and saw the same thing. And of course, a photo of a bare light bulb is an homage to William Eggleston. These influences have steered my photography towards conceptual documentary, an approach that plays into my research project and what ultimately may be my final project for this program. A particular influence have been photo books such as A1, The Great North Road by Paul Graham, Election Eve by William Eggleston, Alex Soos, Sleeping by the Mississippi, and Welcome to Camp America by Debbie Cornwall. These books could be described as conceptual travel logs, not creating a signature or iconic image of a place, but taking scraps to give a broader, perhaps more honest perspective. They may best be described by the title of a work by the conceptual artist Lawrence Weiner, bits and pieces put together to present a semblance of a whole. For me, the bits and pieces to put together are in a place called the Driftless, a region of the American Midwest untouched by the last ice age. I began this project in early 2023 as my capstone or final project for my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at Arizona State University. At the time, it was a start, not an end, to this project, and I feel fortunate to have a chance to continue it at Falmouth. I plan to further examine the places, people, and events of this unique but little-known region of Middle America. While no single photograph tells a complete story, these images will serve as fragments of time coming together to create a visual narrative of a whole. Growing up, I never knew I lived in a place called the Driftless. I was vaguely aware of an artist named Grant Wood who was born nearby and painted a famous picture, and I thought old farmhouses were little more than old farmhouses. Through research and exploration and time, I better appreciate the uniqueness of this place and the connections found throughout. I see the beauty in this region untouched by the glaciers of the last ice age. I've learned more of the world-famous artist Grant Wood, born and buried in this region, and I became part of a family who made me realize a farmhouse, when it's been in that family since the American Civil War, is much more than just a farmhouse. Today I see threads that link these subjects, from the limestone that is the region's literal and figurative foundation to the iconography of a famous painting and much more. There are multiple layers to telling this story, which means multiple layers of research and exploration. One, of course, is the natural history of the region. What does it mean that this landscape was untouched by the glaciers? Another area for examination is the man-made landscape, the small towns and farms that dot the area. The socioeconomics of the driftless play a big part in this project. While I want to take care that this does not turn into poverty porn, poverty is nonetheless an important factor. Rural poverty is different than urban poverty. It's lonelier. Little in the United States can be examined without looking through a political lens, and rural areas such as this have shifted radically. This region was home to loyal Democratic voters for decades, but in the past two presidential elections went overwhelmingly for an authoritarian, Donald Trump. I want to examine the culture of the driftless, which is more vibrant than one might expect. Some of it is predictable of what you might find in middle America, rodeos and stock car races and tractor pulls and the like. But there is the unexpected too, such as award-winning wineries and nationally exhibited artists, and a barn that has become a must-stop concert venue on the alternative music scene. Related to the region's culture is the painter of American Gothic, one of the world's most recognized works of art, who spent most of his life a short drive from his birthplace in the driftless. 80 years after his death, the iconography and ghost of Grant Wood loom over the area. Last but far from least, this is personal. Both my wife and I were born and raised in this region, and 2 years ago we bought and began restoring a stone farmhouse that has been in her family since 1870. Family history plays a key role in this project, perhaps providing the thread that runs through its many layers. Since this course began, I have returned to the region to create new photographs with a focus on documenting more human activity, such as a visit to a large auction of farm equipment. I visited the studio of an artist creating ceramics and pottery, creating art from the soil and clay of the driftless. And I was at a winery early one foggy morning as that year's grape harvest was being picked by hand. Robert Adams is not only a great artist, but also a deep thinker and writer about photography. His words serve as a guide in my approach towards the driftless, to try and honor what is greater and more interesting than I in the photos I make.